Thank you. So good morning, everyone. I'm Amy Shaw with the Greater Binghamton Chamber of Commerce, and welcome to our series Inside the C-Suite. This is number 6, and the topic is Synergize. And I'm so excited to be joined by Kevin Drum, the president of SUNY Broome, and Harvey Stenger, the president of Binghamton University. Really looking forward to hearing from them this morning. So if we can highlight them as well, Colleen, I'd love to start with Kevin on giving just a brief background about yourself, how you got to where you are today.
Well, I'd have to say, mentors are a big part of how I got to where I am today. People encouraging me to do more than certainly at the time in my life I thought that I could do. If you want to put it that way, my intent after changing major 3 or 4 times in college, like so many, was to be a student life professional and maybe be a dean of students someday was kind of the plan. And in working for a dean of students, one day she said, "You should go back to school and get your doctorate. You could be a college president." I had never, it was my second job.
Wow.
Small university.
What was your path in terms of different colleges and universities that you've worked at?
Oh, brother.
You don't have to go back too far, but.
Yeah, I'm your classic itinerant scholar, or some would say I couldn't keep a job. My first job was director of student activities and athletics for the community college in Boston, Bunker Hill Community College, out of my master's degree at Boston University, where I had worked in both student life and student activities, student center, and residential life as a student, as a part-time. That's how I got my career started, part-time jobs and at volunteer as a student leader, both at my community college back in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, and then at Boston University. And parlayed that into a resume and a job at Bunker Hill Community College from there. University of New England, where I was a director of student life. I had residence life again and student activities under me there. And that's where the dean of students encouraged me, said, "You should go back to school and get your doctorate. You could be a college president." I had never thought, that I would be interested or could be qualified to be a college president until she mentioned it. So that's exactly what I did. I left and went full-time to NYU for my PhD. And from there, I spent 10 years in distance learning, University of Maine and Nova Southeastern University, real pioneer of distance learning in the world, Nova Southeastern. Then recruited back to Maine in the distance learning world, and then asked to be a dean of students. I'm kind of a whole accidental situation, much too long to go into, and I did that temporarily and applied to be a vice president for a community college in New Hampshire. A couple of years vice president for student affairs and enrollment management at a community college in New Hampshire. And then I got recruited. To my next vice presidency in Massachusetts. I got recruited to a presidency in Wyoming. Same headhunter recruited me from Wyoming to Broome, to New York, to Binghamton, when I sort of dropped a hint to a couple of headhunters who I knew very well that I was interested in getting back to the East Coast and being near family. Interesting process to go through the recruitment process. You don't always land those jobs that you're recruited for in our line of work, but a couple of them I did.
Nice. Wow. You've been everywhere. Yeah. Harvey, tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure, Amy. I grew up in Skaneateles, New York, not far from here. My geographic diversity is a lot less than Kevin's. I went to college at Cornell, then went to graduate school at MIT. Chemical engineer from day one at Cornell, got my PhD in chemical engineering at MIT. So I was in Boston then, and my first job was at Lehigh University in Bethlehem, and did the traditional rising through the ranks, assistant professor, associate professor, department chair, center director, associate dean, and became dean at Lehigh at a relatively young age, because I was the associate dean when our dean died. And it was like a field promotion almost. And then we went through a search, and I got the job at 36. And that was a big learning experience for me. I then went from there to University of Buffalo, going from middle size or small size private to a big public. I thought was a good move. I would learn a lot, and was the dean of engineering at Buffalo. And then saw the opportunity at Binghamton, and as just like Kevin, same headhunter that got me to go to Buffalo got me to go to Binghamton. So there's a lot to be said in having relationships with headhunters. And so I'm at Binghamton, and so it was Boston, Bethlehem, Buffalo, Binghamton.
Okay, we have a pattern here.
We have a pattern, and it's almost in a circle that's centered back in central New York.
I love it. Well, thank you both. I would love to introduce our facilitator for today and then turn the program over to her. Mary M. Surtee is a dedicated, award-winning leadership consultant with 40+ years of experience in administrative, educational, and business expertise. She specializes in human capitalization, strategic planning, staff development, teaching and learning, and personnel and project management. Mary has served in administration in multiple school districts and as a mentor, coach, and teacher at all levels, K through 12, and college instructor. Locally, Mary serves on several nonprofit boards and is an active member of Binghamton Rotary. Nationally, she has been a consultant and trainer for Franklin Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People since 2002, and she's a proud graduate of the Chamber's Leadership Program, BLI. So I will turn the program over to you, Mary.
Thank you, Amy. Good morning. Welcome to Kevin and Harvey and our virtual participants. So we're excited to be offering the 6th part of our 7-part series centering around the 7 habits of highly effective people. And we're really interested to hear what Kevin and Harvey, what impact the 7 habits has had on their professional teams, as well as their organizations and their personal lives. I'll be providing a brief overview of habit 6, Synergize. And then we're going to engage with Kevin and Harvey so they can share their wisdom and experiences with us. And today's participants, anybody would like the opportunity to ask questions and interact, just type in the chat or raise your hand, and Amy's going to help me monitor the dialogue. So our first slide, for those of you who are new to our series, Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, was written in 1989, and it continues to be one of the 25 most influential business management books. Covey's premise is that character and principles are crucial for effective living and for great leadership. Our second slide, giving some background here, depicts an hourglass model of how the 7 habits fit together. Habits 1, 2, and 3 are in the bottom of that hourglass. And these habits we discussed over the springtime. They center around self-mastery, inner strength, characters based on timeless principles, and a purposeful life and values shown in how we spend and manage our time. During June and July, we moved to the public victory of building effective relationships with others through win-win thinking and seeking first to understand, then be understood. So to Kevin and Harvey, if we springboard off habit 5, seek first to understand, then be understood. Dr. Covey says the greatest human need after physical survival is the need to be understood. It's through sincere, empathic listening that we understand others. So Kevin and Harvey, can you give us a couple of examples of how your use of sincere, empathic listening, that seeking to understand, has made a difference in building relationships and trust and working effectively with members of your leadership team? Let's start first with Harvey this morning.
Oh, I wasn't planning. I was going to let Kevin go first, but thanks, Mary. I appreciate that. Well, you know, before I jump into that question, I do want to say that the things that you learn in books like Covey's books are really important. And the people who are listening, I'm sure, are people who love to read these kinds of books. I remember I didn't read Covey's book. I listened to it. It was a gift from when I was the Dean of Engineering at Lee. It was a gift from one of my advisory board members and it was on tape.
Yeah.
I think it was cassette tape, and I remember painting the room and listening to this book over the course of a weekend. And I really enjoyed it. And that was the first leadership book I'd ever really read. And so as I started to think about how the question about listening would get into this, I started to think about, well, it comes up so often in these leadership books, and probably it started with Dale Carnegie. Mm-hmm. Dale Carnegie said, people don't want to hear about you. They want to tell about them. And if you can turn the conversation around so that it's a conversation about them and not you, you're going to get a lot more out of that relationship. So probably the place that I use listening the most is in fundraising, donor relations. The people that have the wealth and capacity and the inclination to provide donations to the university have had incredibly interesting lives because they've done so many things to accumulate this wealth, and usually they're at an older part of their life, and they have incredible stories to tell. And Carnegie's, one of the things Carnegie says is most people are listening to somebody thinking about what they're going to say next, rather than listening to that person and trying to think what they're going to say next. And so it's a practice. You sit and you listen to somebody instead of trying to think, oh, how am I gonna come up with one of my experiences that'll top their experience, as opposed to how can I think about what they might say next and how can I lead them to talk about that next. Mm-hmm. And that builds a relationship, just like we just started. Tell me about yourself. Tell me about where you've been. And some people are very short about it, and some people want to go into more detail about it. And I have found that listening to people is probably the most important part of doing my job, and fundraising would be one of it. And probably the best example, and I don't know why this one just popped into my head, but I've been thinking about Lehigh a little bit today, that I got the largest gift in Lehigh's history. It's a $25 million gift to name the College of Engineering at Lehigh. And that was in 1985. So I don't know what $25 million is now. But I was playing golf with the donor, and I wasn't playing very well. And I never play really well. But I remember on this par 4 long hole, Saucon Valley, very prestigious country club, I hit a 2-iron, which I don't even think I own anymore, 3 feet from the hole, and birdied the hole, only hole I played well on. And that's all that Peter Rossin, who was the donor, talked about the rest of the day. And I said, I want to be like this guy. He's helping me struggling through this game. And we sat there afterwards having a cocktail at the country club, and I just got to know his entire life history because I was so enamored with him and I wanted to listen to him. And then about 2 or 3 years later, he made this incredible donation to Lehigh. So it pays off to listen too, if you listen carefully. Is that a good start?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Harvey. And there's a little bit of deliberateness there, pays off really financially in that world of fundraising for you. So thank you so much for sharing. Kevin, how about you? Can you tell us how the seeking to understand this listening has made a difference in relationships, your leadership teams, and trust in the organization?
Yeah, kind of going back a little bit, like Harvey. God, you can hit a 2-iron. I mean that's amazing that you even had one in your bag back then. Lee Trevino was very famous about saying, if you're ever in a lightning storm, hold your 2-iron in the air because even God can't hit a 2-iron. So my second, well, actually both right from day one in student life, learning to listen to students. And sure, Harvey does it in the morning with his runs, on his runs with students. That's part of why you would do a regular activity like that, to hear what your students have to say. But coming up through the ranks in student life, you sort of cut your teeth on listening to students. It's what it's all about, and trying to provide support for whatever's going on in their lives at the time. And working at this was a small residential college where the then dean suggested I ought to get my doctorate and maybe become a particularly community college president. She knew community colleges were growing and expanding fast. But learning to listen to the vast variety of student backgrounds and student interests and student needs, and so of course I've always looked for that in hiring and supporting and helping to groom the leadership team around me. And kind of an example, Amy and I had this sort of conversation offline about even very early on in my career, I tended to think big picture. Didn't realize it, but again, the same dean who said I, might make a good college president suggested that because I tended to think big picture, that was a good start toward being a college president. I had gone to work for this little university. It's not so little anymore. The University of New England, if anybody knows it, Southern Maine. At the time had about 600 students. They'd just opened an osteopathic medical school and added physical therapy and occupational therapy. Like a couple of years later, added nursing while I was there. They were becoming primarily a health science university. It had a strong science core previously, but also was largely a male institution, was originally founded as a male institution, as one of the several St. Francis colleges in the nation. But with bringing on physical therapy and occupational therapy, and then planning for nursing, they had added osteopathic medicine, although at the time medicine was still predominantly male. But more women in an osteopathic medical school than you'd find in the traditional MD programs in those days. I think women are a majority in medical schools today, but that was definitely not the case at the time. Anyway, it certainly was the case in physical therapy and occupational therapy and planning for nursing, that all of a sudden a flood of young, female students came into the college that had previously been quite male dominated and very, very sports oriented for those guys. And it dawned on me one day that we've got to start providing different kinds of programs, different types of support for what is rapidly becoming a majority female student body. And having that conversation with the entire leadership team for the college, small place, like I said, there's only 600 students there then total, including the graduate medical school. Today, I think there's 13 or 14,000 students. That was kind of an epiphany for me when I really realized from listening to students the kinds of things that were going on that weren't being paid attention to, and help to change the demographics changed the culture of the little university, but helped to change the way programming and focus on programming for students went from that point forward.
Great example, Kevin. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm going to move now forward to our habit for this month, and it's habit 6 is Synergize. This is the final habit in the public victory of building interdependent relationships with others. It's a habit where we can apply openness and communication to look at a problem or opportunity and work to create synergy. It's a mutually beneficial, better solution, a third alternative. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Synergy takes place when 2 or more people produce together something better than what they could have produced separately. It's an action and a creative process. It enables you to arrive at a third alternative. Music is a great example of synergy. The parts come together to produce something greater than the sum of what each individual musician and instrument could have produced separately. If you move to my next slide, Amy, when people synergize together, it's like 4 plus 6 is 25. Something new is created. It's a third alternative. It's what's produced by an outstanding athletic team. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. It's what's produced by high-functioning corporate teams, educational teams, technology teams, and even families. So to Kevin and Harvey, can you describe a couple of teams throughout your career that you are a member of, which functioned with synergy and produced great results? Think back for us. I'll start with Kevin this time. Kevin?
Yeah, thanks, Mary. I've been fortunate in a couple of my jobs where I was the first to do it. And so that kind of pioneering spirit infected me and those around me and who were hired, for instance, to start the Community College of Maine. That was my first job out of my PhD program, and back to the work world full time. And we were setting up 50 interactive television locations around the state of Maine. Maine, very rural state. It was a long way for the average person to drive to one of the 7 University of Maine campuses, or one of the then technical colleges, now community colleges. And again, in working with that team, I was a major cog in the team, overseeing the people who were overseeing all these 50 locations. I reported to a vice president in that role. But to try to bring a synergy to 50 different locations, about 35 of them were in high schools. Another 15 were actually these outposts that were a few had already existed in the state of Maine for the University of Maine system. It was all 7 universities involved. I think there were 6 technical colleges at the time, and then roughly 35 high schools to do this interactive television program. All the courses were going to be taught from one of the 7 University of Maine campuses to these, anywhere from 1 or 2 locations to all 50 at once. And that was a very exciting time for all of us. Staff scattered across a very large state like Maine. It's almost as big as New York square miles wise. And the synergy almost came naturally, because nobody would have accepted a job in that circumstances if you weren't a pioneer, whether you were going to be opening one of the new centers or you're going to be coordinating the interactive television classroom at the high school. Those were part-time folks working for those high schools, and being paid part-time to also work for the university. There was a real excitement there in getting that up and running. It still runs today, although they don't use the high school classrooms anymore for the interactive television. They do use the outposts and the 7 University of Maine campuses, although I think one of them has been consolidated. So there's 6 universities today with 7 campuses. And that was a very exciting time, but people kind of signed on with this pioneering spirit to begin with, to create this synergy all across the entire state.
So obviously you produced great results, and I'm going to say that there was a common mission and a common vision of what you could do as a team there. And it really obviously took off, and you said that energy and synergy was with all of you. And that's a great example. Thank you for sharing that with us. Harvey, how about you? Can you describe a couple of teams throughout your career that you were a member of and it functioned with that high energy and that passion and produced great results?
Sure. I was really thinking hard about the word synergy, because I actually wrote a paper that had the word synergy in the title. And synergy needs to have multiple things that are doing multiple different things that are helping each other. And it really, you really have to look at it more technically than just good teamwork. Good teamwork is one level, but synergy is another level beyond good teamwork. And probably the most significant one was how we dealt with the pandemic. it was one of those things where, but let me first start with our strategic plan that we built in 2012, 2013, where we had 400 people on 9 different groups for 6 months, coming up with campus university priorities, goals, objectives, metrics, targets. And it was one of those things where I'd seen it happen. I'd been part of it at different organizations, but I knew that if you pulled this off, you would build trust in an organization, because you are essentially saying, I'm the president, but I'm going to entrust the people who've been here their entire lives in developing the plan for the future. And I'll just be the one who stewards it. That trust then 9 years later, fast forward 9 years later, we're in the pandemic.
Mhm.
And I remember the night, it was February, probably 12th. And we're on a Zoom call because it was an emergency. It was maybe 6 o'clock at night. We had just had the highest number of positive tests so we had ever imagined. I think it was 35 that day. We had run out of beds to isolate students in who were testing positive. And there were about 15 people on this call. And nobody could say anything. We all just stared at the Zoom picture. It seemed like forever. But nobody had an idea of what we were going to do. We were inches away from saying, we have to close.
Mhm.
The next couple of days, it got worse. I mean, we got up to 60 positives a day. And we had only, at the beginning, we only had about 40 beds to put students in isolation. So we kind of pulled it together that night. We formed a team. We pulled people there were 25 people that we pulled together. We met every morning for the next 2 months. And we just went around the room, and everybody had a role to play. And they knew what that role to play was, and they knew that they didn't have time to worry about somebody else playing the role. They just had to assume that somebody else is playing the role. So from the time a student got tested until they were isolated in a dormitory on campus was a critical period of time where they could infect more students. Now, the nice thing about all this is that students who were infected weren't getting sick. They didn't have symptoms. They weren't going to the hospital, but they were creating a sense of emergency on campus. So we came up with a strategy with this team of 25 people meeting every morning, how we could get students from that positive test result. Now, they go into the testing center, they swab their nose, they get a text message about 30 minutes later, go to this portal, find out if you're positive or not. If they're positive, a whole set of series of events has to unfold involving dozens, maybe 100 people. From contacting them, coaching them through their options, whether they would go home, whether they would stay on campus. If they went home, we would actually pay them the lost housing fee that they would have had to pay if they were living there. We then had to form a team that would transport them from wherever they were living. They had to move all their stuff out of their room. Then we had to contact trace all the students around it. That took another team. We then had to bring them to the isolation bed location. Once they're there, they have needs. You've got to feed them 3 times a day. So now we've got to bring in the dining services aspect. They get packages. They have prescriptions that have to be picked up at the pharmacy. So we had to form a team that was accomplishing that. They sat there and they were bored to death in their rooms. We organized student groups who would entertain them at their windows,
Mhm.
and song.
Mhm.
I would call every student who had a birthday, and it was about a dozen during the time. I would call them and wish them happy birthday.
Great.
At the end of it, and it ended, and we got through this period, and the curve dropped down, and we came back to normal. And we never hit that. We had a 5% threshold. If we went to 5% threshold in the spring, we would have gone completely remote. We got up to about 3.5%, and we curbed it down because of this rapid response of getting people in isolation. And it was interesting when it came down, and we were meeting every morning still, we had to say, we don't have to meet anymore, maybe once a week. And there was this almost sadness of this feeling that, oh, really? You know, we just solved probably the biggest problem that we've ever addressed in our lives. And we don't get to play anymore in that game. Next Friday, we're having a party though, a big party. People are coming to a cocktail party on the campus where we're going to recognize all of them for their work over that period of time. That was probably the one, that's definitely a highlight of my career. And I think it was synergy, that it was assembling all these people who had different skills, who just on a Zoom call could rapidly say if they needed help, and somebody else would just jump in and say, I can help you. I know how to do that.
So I think
go ahead, Mary.
I think that's a great example with a really serious topic here that, you know, life and death, one's health and caring for students, making those decisions. It was a process that wasn't easy, but it was worth the effort because together you produce some greater results. And it requires that attitude of being open. You said to be open to all those people on the team, and everybody was a contributor. You'd examine, explore new perspectives in this unpredictable, unseen world that's been thrown at us with this pandemic. We had to find new opportunities, new paradigms, and solutions to these really serious problems. Great example, Harvey. Do you have a team today? You said you're going to be making some decisions about masking that. Do you have a team today coming together to do that work?
We have kept the executive team of that together, and they meet every Friday. They're starting to ramp up a little bit right now. So yeah, they didn't stop. It's not the full 25 people. It's 10 people that meet every Friday now.
Great. Amy, if you want to go to slide 7, we know that sometimes teams and partnerships or even personal relationships fail to capitalize. Thanks, Amy. They fail to capitalize on opportunities to solve the problems in third alternatives or creative ways. And you can see some of the barriers here to synergy, you know, prejudice, low trust, incorrect information. So to Kevin and Harvey, can you identify some situations in which you'd like greater teamwork, that higher level of synergy? What are some barriers right now to some of those teams out there, and what conditions would need to exist to support more synergy? And what's your role in that? So I'm really looking for you to help us think about what some barriers are sometimes to getting to synergy, these third alternatives. Who'd like to go first?
I'll go. I think it's my turn to go first, Kevin. I think I'll go.
Go ahead, Harvey.
So as we were preparing for this, I was thinking about, okay, what do people want to hear from me? Oh, I think the pandemic story is a good one because it was crazy here. I want to talk about Johnson City next, because I think that's people wonder what the hell's going on in Johnson City, tearing down all these buildings over there. So this is one where there's a lot of barriers, logistical, technical barriers, but also political barriers, relationship barriers, trust barriers, all those things that you had on that slide. It started. I make this up, but I think it was Christmas Eve, and Tom Libis called me and he said, "What can I get for you? We're in the middle of negotiations of the budget, and I think I got the governor, and I can get whatever you want, Harvey." You know, Tom, he was always planning and plotting. And I said, I want to build a pharmacy building for a pharmacy school. He said, "How much is that going to cost?" I said, "I don't know. I'll get back to you." So I call him right back. I called somebody in facilities and I said, "I need $60 million. He said, 16? I said, no, 60 million dollars. And he said, "That's a lot of money." I said, "Well, we got to do it right." And he said, "All right, I'll get it for you. I'll get you the money if you build a school in Johnson City." And I said, "Oh, crap. What?" So I didn't know where Johnson City was, probably. So I go over there and I drive around. I go, "This is not going to be fun." I mean, plopping a bunch of graduate students in the middle of this place is going to be very difficult. There's a lot of barriers there. But who would turn down $60 million? So we grabbed it. We built the building. It's full. We've graduated our first class last year. And then we said, we've got to do more here because they're kind of an island in there. We were lucky that, gosh, I can't remember his name now. Larry, can't remember his name, but he bought the Sunrise Century building and put housing in the next to the pharmacy building. That was a great co-investment. And then we decided that we needed to buy some more properties over there. So we actually, 48 Corliss was a small purchase, wasn't very expensive. And the building next to that we tore down was a gift from somebody in the area, an alum. So now we started to build this pile of properties that had really no value. And we realized, okay, we've got this box factory, this 48 Corliss tall, skinny building. What can we do with that? Well, we came up with a nursing school. So we put that there. A lot of barriers to that. Of course, we needed another $50 million. And we were about the same time winning the Upstate Revitalization Initiative, the $500 million Cuomo prize that we won in, can't remember when that was, 2015, 2016. And so we got the money from that in order to renovate the 48 Corliss into our nursing building, which is done now, a beautiful building. We're expanding into physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech and language pathology, but it's still not done. I mean, we still need a lot of activity over there in order to make this a livable place for students. So then we had to start buying other properties. And now everybody said, oh, the university's got a lot of money. They're going to spend anything to buy my property. And so we were paying elevated prices. The fortunate thing is that we had a source of money for when we sold the university club, U Club on Bristol Parkway. When we sold that about 8 years ago, we made a really good profit. And we decided that we would reinvest that money into more real estate. And so we started buying properties in Johnson City, recently tearing them down. But there's a lot of criticism. There's a lot of people that say, what's going to happen to the people that you're displacing? What's happening? You're taking properties that were paying taxes and now you're not for profit. You're not paying taxes. There's going to be a change in the mayor in Johnson City. There's going to be questions about whether we're really contributing or not. And so we've had to message and communicate as best as we can. We've used all the connections that we have in Johnson City. We've built a website called the Johnson City Story Map that describes everything we've done over there for the last 6 years, so people can look at it day by day, step by step, what we've been doing. And our hope is that, and this is a long-term goal, and this is another barrier, is time. Time is a barrier to accomplish some of these things. But in 10 years, we anticipate that those businesses on Main Street will be revitalized. They'll have new uses for them. We'll have 1,000 students going there every day. They'll be walking through the park that we're building out of the properties that we bought and torn down. We're going to be building a park. And it will be a place that I think people will look back and say, those were good decisions, but when they were making them, people didn't understand them. People really didn't see the big picture. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the other part of the barriers, is that how do you educate people who sometimes don't want to be educated, just want to poke at you because you're the big bad whatever, and they're going to poke you whether you've done something good or not. But you have to kind of hold your hat on tight and bear the wind and keep stepping forward.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Harvey. Certainly it's been a huge issue in our community, repurposing, revitalization, and the role of both of the institutions, SUNY Broome and Binghamton University, and in making that happen here in Broome County. Kevin, how about you? Where do you think some barriers are in a project or a situation that you've dealt with in your career, or something current?
Yeah, I mean, I could talk about the culinary and event center, downtown as well, and repurposing that beautiful historic building. But I will say that there's a bit of history happening back in Wyoming, where my first presidency took place. They had two substantial campuses, although in Wyoming they're small. and 120 miles apart, different counties. And there was always a fair amount of tension between the folks in Campbell County, Gillette, Wyoming, the coal capital of the United States, 16 surface coal mines in that one county in Wyoming, going through major transitions today, as you can imagine. And then this beautiful little town and campus 120 miles away in Sheridan, Wyoming on the Montana border. And there was always a tension between the two, and people talk, oh, they should separate. They got a lot of money over there in Campbell County. They should have their own college. Why are we together? Well, synergy was the answer, although a lot of it was economic. You could have the two smallest colleges in Wyoming, or you could have one that was right up there with the two largest colleges in Wyoming, from the two cities, Casper and Cheyenne, had the larger single campuses. And then you need two presidents, you need two athletic directors, you need three more vice presidents. You're very expensive to run two small colleges versus one. So, I just went in with the philosophy, with very different communities, 120 miles apart, athletic rivals in high school. We've all dealt with. I deal with it right here in the town of Shenango between CV and Forks and twice now voting down consolidation in a community that's really too small to have two full-blown school districts, but that's New York. So big athletic rivalries as well. So I came in with the opposite vision. I said, we're here to serve we're community college. We're here to serve our communities. What's best for Gillette, Wyoming is not going to be what's best for Sheridan, Wyoming, and vice versa. And that's what we have to focus on. Well, guess what? The students, the faculty, the people in both of those communities really appreciated that answer. It's not, previously was looked at more as the rivalry than what can both institutions do to best serve their community, and quite different communities 120 miles apart. Ironically, and it became very successful. In fact, we changed the name from Gillette Campus to Gillette College. Multi-college community colleges are pretty common in the rest of the country, not in the Northeast. Multi-campus, yes. Multi-college, no. And we changed the name from Gillette Campus to Gillette College. They poured tens of millions of dollars into facilities there that they spent their own money in Campbell County. They didn't ask Sheridan County for any money to do that. Built a beautiful campus while we were there. And I think, sadly, today, this is 12 years later, I believe it's today or tomorrow, two presidents later, new president came in from a multi-college state, actually, California, where there are a number of multi-college community college districts in California. There's a vote in Campbell County today to separate and have their own college. President came in with a very different view of things, and immediately forced a political, went back beyond the old political divide between the two campuses, unfortunately. And it's either today or tomorrow. There's actually a vote in the county to separate Gillette College from the Northern Wyoming Community College District and have its own college. They'll have to go out and hire a president and vice presidents and all of the backroom computer. It will cost them millions of dollars to separate, and Sheridan will lose all economy of scale. It'll have the smallest economy of scale in the state of Wyoming for any college, and there's some really small colleges in Wyoming. It will cost them a lot of money in the future because they're no longer getting along. Assuming the vote goes through, because of the money, it might not. It will cost Campbell County a lot of money to run a separate college. It's sad to see, but different leaders have different views of things, and things change when new CEOs come in.
Thank you for sharing. You're touching a little bit, Kevin, on your ability, it feels like, to value those differences in those two different cities in Wyoming there. And really that is the essence of synergy, is valuing differences. And Amy, if you throw up slide 8 there, it doesn't imply that we approve or we absolutely agree with the differences. However, it means that people respect differences and view them as an opportunity for learning. Our differing opinions of others and their viewpoints, their perspectives, their talents, their gifts, it enables us to discover and produce things together that we would be much less likely to discover and produce individually. So differences by themselves don't create synergy, but our challenge is to respect and appreciate the differences and learn what they show us. We can see them as a benefit, or in the case Kevin gave us, as a threat. And we can choose one or the other, and we can determine the quality of relationships, the quality of communities in our lives. So I have Stephen Covey here in a quick 3-minute video clip, and Stephen's going to talk about valuing differences, and then we're going to go to Harvey and Kevin for some thoughts.
Habit 6, synergize. In fact, you could almost say the fundamental principle of 6 is to always value differences. It's not something you just accept that there are differences. It's not something that you tolerate. It's not something that is legislated through diversity programs. It is something that you celebrate. I mean, genuinely, the strength lies in differences, not in similarities. However, if there is not a common purpose and a common set of principles, a buy-in to these universal principles we've been talking about, diversity, differences can result in chaos and negative synergy. And it spawns prejudice, prejudgment. And remember, prejudice is a protection against being vulnerable. If I get my security from my ability to manipulate people as things, and I can classify them, it protects me, see? I don't have to deal with people. I just deal with categories, and I have them labeled, and then I get into the self-fulfilling prophecy, and it is a seedbed to all kinds of other problems. That's why it requires this integrity of the first 3 habits. It requires the development of a common purpose, a common sense of meaning, a common sense of mission. What is it we're about? The moment you can achieve that, then run with differences in perceptions, in gifts, in talents. The more you have difference, the better. The capability of inventing new approaches, third alternatives, is increased exponentially because of differences. Strength literally lies in difference. These aren't just nice words to value differences. These are moral imperatives for those that really want to solve problems in entirely new ways. Go for synergy. So the moment someone disagrees with you, what do you say to them? Good. You see it differently. That's why I so value my wife's input, because I'll say, well, how do you see it? And she'll see it totally differently. But honestly, if you can learn to value differences and teach your children, the moment there's a difference, run with it.
Great. So
Habit 6,
Kevin and Harvey, could you describe a couple situations from your work life or personal life where valuing those differences, a colleague, an opponent, a competitor, it led to synergy and produced greater results than what you could have produced separately? What did you learn from an experience when those differences were valued and a common mission or purpose was come to? I think, Kevin, you're up.
Well, I mean, certainly one, that that I can point to, and we have a few, is our partnership, with the university, with Binghamton. Goes, it actually predates Harvey slightly, when the interim president was there, and that was due to a relationship. We both had a very good friend in Washington, and when Peter McGrath came here from Washington, said, our mutual friend said, "You guys got to meet each other, get together, and just at least just become friends and colleagues while Peter's in town for a little while." And we started talking, about the Binghamton Advantage program, and our joint admissions with the university, which has certainly been hugely helpful for us at the college, but in all honesty, probably more helpful to us than it's been to the university to take it on. But then the university is providing access, which is what community colleges are all about, to a couple hundred students a year who otherwise wanted to go to Binghamton but didn't quite have the educational moxie to get in immediately as a freshman. So we've got the synergy there of using our access mission to help students who were passionate about getting into to Binghamton University, but again, didn't quite have the grades or the test scores to get in day one. So a real synergy there, certainly for between the two colleges, and the benefit to those students, and other partnerships have grown from there. With Harvey, that program itself has grown under Harvey's leadership and great friendship and colleagueship that we share. And next came the incubator, as a joint effort, and a lot of synergy there for both institutions with the physical space and the programming, which really helps our community, provides definitely greater than some of the parts what's coming out of the incubator, and then most recently with the joint with the transfer agreement, the guaranteed transfer agreement with the Watson School, with the business school, another level of partnership and synergy there, again for students who wouldn't get directly into the Watson School, provides them an access route to get there. Which is great benefit to both institutions, and in particular our mission to those students. So right here in our backyard, and part of the reason why that works is our difference. Very competitive, very selective public university, and an open access mission community college. We really otherwise don't compete with one another. We're not stepping on each other's toes, as might be the case with, say, a community college and a metropolitan university in other parts of the country, where that sort of thing, right here in New York, it happens. And there's more tension, and because there's not enough difference between who's being admitted to a metropolitan university and who's being admitted to the community college. So not enough difference there for them to get along real well. They compete more. So the difference here for the two entities, for the university and the community college, and for the community, provides an enormous benefit for both the community and our students tend to be local, and for both entities.
Great example of how both the institutions have your differences actually bring you together to work on synergy. And I love the 3 examples, Kevin. Thank you. Harvey, would you like to add to that? Are there ways that you would say, your institutions have worked together to synergize, and also, opportunities that you've had where you valued differences and they created that third alternative?
Yeah, and Kevin really nailed it with those are opportunities that are there because of our differences. And then when you see those differences and you grasp them, the incubator was a great one because we weren't eligible for that money. Only the community college was eligible for that second tranche of money that we won. And we worked together, and that we redesigned the building and put a 3rd floor on it. And it's a very successful operation. The one that I'm working on right now is the concept of telecommuting. It's a big issue. It's a tough issue. I'm traditionalist. I think there's something about driving to work, parking in the parking lot, coming in and seeing your colleagues is as part of your job as it is to do your job. But that's not the way the world is right now.
Mhm.
A lot of fact out there that perhaps not working in person all the time is the best way to do it. I still don't believe it, but I am willing to listen to other people's opinions about it, especially single parents, especially people who take care of their elders, which I've never had to do. And so I have that lack of experience. And it took a group of people who I have a lot of trust in, and I think they have a lot of trust in me, which are our senior officers around the table, vice presidents, directors, to kind of, and trust is so important in order to use diversity, because there's not trust there, like Covey was saying, the diversity will just end up being a barrier. You'll just hold it against other people. And the trust then allows you to have conflict, open conflict. If you can't have an open conflict dialogue because you don't trust each other, you're not going to probably find good solutions to problems.
Mhm.
Right now, we are in the middle of this conversation about whether we are going to start a telecommuting program now, later. And I hope there's no press on the call here, but it's going to happen sooner rather than later.
Mhm.
And it's going to be hard for me because I don't know if I'm going to look forward to it, but the people around me have convinced me that it's probably the right thing to do right now, at least in selective, and the application is going to be a little bit onerous, but in selective ways of allowing people to utilize alternative work arrangements is the term we use it right now, to get their job done. And I think they cannot be student-facing jobs, they cannot be customer-facing jobs, they cannot be teaching. We want teaching to be in person. So there's going to be some restrictions on it, but I think it will lead to a different participation in the workforce by people who have different constraints than I grew up with.
Thank you for sharing that. I hope you get to that third alternative with this initiative, Harvey. Amy, if you throw up my last slide, I want to bring some closure here. And here's a quote, some wisdom from Dr. Covey. He says, the person.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Oh my
God. You'll find it. Next one. There you go. The person who's truly effective has the humility and reverence to recognize his own perceptual limitations and appreciate those rich resources available through the interactions with the hearts and minds of other human beings. And I just like to say to both Kevin and to Harvey that you've talked today to us about how synergy works. It's a correct principle. It's like the crowning achievement of all the other 5 habits. It's that effectiveness through interdependence, and your examples of your 2 institutions coming together to work together for our community and for our students, that teamwork, team building, unity, and wonderful creativity with other human beings. And I just like to thank both of you today for sharing not only your professional examples, but of yourself also, and it's been a pleasure. I hope people will join us next month for our last habit, Habit 7, Sharpen the Saw, and I'll turn it back over to Amy.
Yes, thank you so much. Our last program is scheduled for Thursday, September 2nd, so stay tuned on details. Harvey and Kevin, I could probably listen to both of you all day. You tell great stories. I love the synergy between your organizations. And thank you for doing so many great things in our community. We greatly appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome. Have a great day, everyone.
Take care, everyone.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.